Imagine waking up in a world where the air feels heavier, predators tower over you, and every sunrise could be your last. No houses. No fire at your fingertips. No supermarkets. Just your bare hands, your wits, and the unforgiving wilderness of early human evolution. The question isn't how you'd thrive. It's whether you'd even survive the first week. Close your eyes and picture this. You wake up barefoot, no clothes except maybe a rough animal hide thrown over your shoulders, and the first thing that hits you is the cold, a biting, bone-deep chill that makes every breath feel like knives. Or maybe it's the opposite, a humid, suffocating heat, where every step through the dense jungle feels like pushing through a wall of fire. That was the world of our ancestors. A world without comfort zones. Depending on the era, early humans faced ice age glaciers, scorching savannas, or thick, predator-filled forests. There was no such thing as stable weather or predictable seasons. A rainstorm could flood your shelter, lightning could set the grasslands ablaze, or a sudden frost could kill the little food you'd gathered. Survival wasn't about making long-term plans, it was about making it through the next sunrise. Water wasn't a given, either. You couldn't turn a tap, you'd wander for hours searching for streams, hoping they weren't already claimed by larger, deadlier animals. And when you did find water, drinking it came with risks. Parasites, disease, and contamination were constant threats. Welcome to Before Flame. Fire. If you enjoyed traveling back in time with me, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next journey into our ancient past. For modern humans used to climate control, bottled water, and roofs over our heads, this environment would be instant death. Imagine your first night, crouched in the dark, the wind howling through trees or across icy plains. No fire, no walls, just you, the elements, and the creeping realization that nature doesn't care if you live or die. This was the daily reality for early humans, an Earth that was as hostile as it was breathtaking. Now, if you thought the weather was your biggest problem, think again. Because the moment you step outside your cave or shelter, you're no longer at the top of the food chain. Your prey. Saber-toothed cats, cave lions, and packs of hyenas roamed the plains. Giant crocodiles lurked near rivers, waiting for anything or anyone to step too close. Even birds of prey could swoop down, targeting children left unattended. For early humans, every trip for water or food was a gamble. Every rustle in the grass could mean death. And predators weren't the only invisible killers. Disease was everywhere. Without modern medicine, even a small cut could turn into a deadly infection. Drinking the wrong water might give you parasites that drained your energy until you collapsed. A fever wasn't just uncomfortable, it was often a death sentence. Food was another constant battle. Hunting meant risking your life against animals much bigger and stronger than you. Gathering meant knowing which plants would keep you alive and which would poison you instantly. One wrong choice, and your first week would also be your last. And here's the brutal truth: early humans didn't always win. They weren't invincible warriors. Entire groups could be wiped out by a single predator attack, a sudden illness, or even starvation. Survival meant constant awareness, constant fear, and constant adaptation. For us, in the modern world, just stepping outside into that environment without preparation would be the equivalent of being dropped into a survival horror game on the hardest difficulty setting. Except here, there's no restart button. This was the reality of daily life. Danger from every direction, seen and unseen. Now let's talk about the 3 things you'd need just to make it through your first week. Food, fire, and shelter. Sounds simple, right? But in the world of early humans, each of these was a battle in itself. Food wasn't just sitting around waiting for you. Hunting meant chasing down massive animals with nothing more than sharpened sticks or stone tools. Imagine standing in front of a furious wild boar or a mammoth, knowing that if your strike isn't perfect, you're the one that's dinner. Even if you got lucky, butchering and preserving the meat before it spoiled was another challenge. If hunting failed, gathering was your backup. But here's the terrifying part: without generations of knowledge, how would you know which berries would fill your stomach and which ones would stop your heart? Trial and error wasn't much of an option, because one mistake was fatal. And then there's fire. Today, we just flip a switch or strike a lighter. Back then, fire was life, and making it was almost magic. You needed the right stones, dry tinder, and the skill to spark a flame, all in a world where rain and wind could snuff it out instantly. Without fire, there was no warmth, no cooked food, No protection from predators circling in the dark. Shelter was the third pillar of survival. Some groups found caves, others built crude huts of wood and animal skins. But imagine crawling into one at night, hearing wolves howl outside, the fire sputtering low, and knowing that if it went out, the cold or predators would finish you before dawn. In short, even the basics weren't guaranteed. For early humans, survival was a 24/7 struggle against hunger, cold, and fear. Up until now, you've been fighting nature with your bare hands. But here's the turning point, the moment that separates humans from every other creature on Earth: tools. The first stone tools may not look like much to us today, sharp-edged rocks, cracked and chipped by hand. But to early humans, they were game changers. With a single flake of stone, you could slice meat, crack open bones for marrow, or scrape hides to make clothing. That simple act of striking stone against stone was nothing less than the beginning of technology. Think about the leap this represents. Most animals survive with what they're born with: claws, teeth, speed. Humans, we made our own advantages. A sharp stone in your hand was an artificial claw. A wooden spear tipped with flint gave you reach that no lion or wolf could match. For the first time, we weren't just prey, we were competitors. And with tools came cooperation. Making them required knowledge: which rocks to pick, how to strike them, how to pass down techniques. Suddenly, survival wasn't just about strength, it was about skill and memory. This was humanity's first inheritance, long before books or schools, a tradition of innovation shared around campfires. Tools also unlocked new food sources. Bones once left behind by predators were now cracked open for nutrient-rich marrow. Hard-shelled nuts could be broken. Even hides, once useless, could be worked into crude clothing. With every strike of stone, humans were expanding their menu and their chances of survival. This was the first spark of something bigger: ingenuity. And it would ignite everything else, from fire mastery to language. Imagine trying to hunt a massive bison without words. You point, you grunt, you wave your arms, chaos. Early humans faced this exact problem, and the solution was something far greater than tools: the beginnings of language. It didn't start with full sentences. It began with simple signals: a shout to warn of danger, a gesture to show direction, a shared rhythm during a hunt. Over time, these crude sounds and movements grew into something revolutionary: structured communication. This wasn't just about survival efficiency, though that was a huge part of it. Think about it. If you can tell your tribe where the water is, warn them about predators, or share knowledge about edible plants, your group's odds of survival skyrocket. But communication did something deeper, too. It created connection. For the first time, humans weren't just isolated individuals struggling against nature. They were storytellers. Around fires, they could share memories of hunts, pass down knowledge of seasons, and even weave early myths that gave meaning to the chaos of existence. These stories became more than entertainment. They were survival guides encoded in memory. And here's the wildest part: scientists believe language actually rewired our brains. The act of forming words, sharing thoughts, and understanding each other strengthened social bonds and expanded our capacity for abstract thought. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were imagining, planning, and dreaming. Language gave humanity something no tool ever could: unity. A group that could coordinate with words was stronger than any lone predator. Together, they could defend, hunt, and thrive. This was the birth of culture, of cooperation, the very roots of what we now call civilization. Picture the first time our ancestors tamed fire. Not the accidental flames caused by lightning, but controlled fire, built, guarded, and fed by human hands. Imagine the awe, a flickering glow that turned night into day, fear into safety, and cold into warmth. For early humans, fire was more than just heat. It was a weapon against predators. No saber-toothed cat dared creep too close when flames crackled at the cave's entrance. It was also a tool for cooking, which changed everything. Cooked meat was easier to chew, easier to digest, and released more nutrients. Some scientists even believe fire literally reshaped our bodies, shrinking our jaws and fueling our growing brains. But fire's power wasn't just physical, it was psychological. It gave humans a sense of control over nature. For the first time, they weren't just victims of their environment, they were shaping it. Fire became the heart of human gatherings. Around it, language flourished, stories were told, and strategies were made. Fire wasn't just survival, it was culture. Still, controlling fire wasn't simple. It required constant vigilance. If flames died out, relighting them was nearly impossible without sparks or flint. Whole tribes might have revolved around keeping a single fire alive, passing it like a sacred torch from generation to generation. Losing it could mean death. This fragile mastery of fire marks one of humanity's greatest leaps. It transformed us from clever animals into true innovators, bending the raw elements of the earth to our will. With fire, humans weren't just surviving, they were beginning to dominate. It was the ultimate tool of ingenuity, one that would forever separate us from every other creature on the planet. The dawn of human history wasn't a story of a single species rising uncontested. It was a brutal game of survival played against rivals just as smart, just as resourceful, and just as desperate. Picture it, the Earth wasn't only home to Homo sapiens. Neanderthals roamed the icy plains of Europe. Denisovans lived in parts of Asia. Even smaller human relatives like Homo floresiensis clung to survival on remote islands. This wasn't a peaceful coexistence. Resources were scarce. Hunting grounds, rivers, and safe caves meant life or death. Every tribe, whether sapiens or Neanderthal, wanted the same thing: food, fire, and territory. Conflicts weren't fought with armies, but with ambushes, raids, and desperate struggles. Imagine stumbling into another group in the wilderness. No words exchanged, just tension, weapons raised, the knowledge that only one group might walk away. And yet, these rival humans weren't mindless enemies. Neanderthals, for example, weren't brutish cavemen. They were skilled hunters, stronger than sapiens, and capable of crafting tools and even art. Some evidence suggests they cared for their sick and buried their dead with ritual. They weren't so different from us. That similarity made them dangerous rivals, and, in some cases, unexpected partners. For there's another twist: survival wasn't always about fighting. Sometimes it meant mixing. DNA evidence shows that sapiens didn't just clash with Neanderthals and Denisovans, they interbred. Many of us today still carry fragments of their genetic legacy, a permanent reminder that the struggle for territory was both violent and intimate. In this world of rivals, sapiens had to be more than strong, they had to be clever. They needed an edge that would help them outlast not only predators but other humans. And that edge was about to change everything. If brute strength alone had determined survival, Neanderthals might have ruled the world. But sapiens possessed something more dangerous than muscles: the ability to unite, to cooperate in ways no other species could match. Picture a hunting ground where a group of Neanderthals might send out a handful of hunters to track mammoths. Meanwhile, a band of sapiens could organize dozens of individuals, splitting roles between trackers, drivers, and ambushers. Communication, through gestures, shared language, or even song, gave them an extraordinary advantage. It wasn't about one person's strength, it was about the strength of many acting as one. This cooperation extended beyond the hunt. Sapiens began to form broader social networks, alliances between groups that stretched across valleys and rivers. A Neanderthal band might consist of a few dozen individuals, but sapiens could call on hundreds, even thousands, when groups came together. These connections meant shared knowledge, shared resources, and, when needed, shared warriors. And strategy mattered as much as numbers. Early sapiens developed long-range weapons like the spear thrower and eventually the bow, allowing them to strike from a distance. Neanderthals, powerful as they were, relied heavily on close combat, which was deadly, but risky. When sapiens combined teamwork with ranged weapons, they turned hunting and warfare into calculated, coordinated strikes rather than brute clashes. This shift tilted the balance. Cooperation wasn't just survival, it was dominance. While rivals might fight as individuals or small bands, sapiens became something larger. Communities bound by trust, memory, and shared purpose. It was this very cooperation, this ability to think and act collectively, that began to carve out their control over the land. And soon, that control would transform into something even more profound: culture and belief. As sapiens spread, survival became about more than food or territory. Something deeper was emerging: culture, belief, and identity. These weren't luxuries, they were weapons of survival as powerful as any spear. Imagine a small campfire at night. Around it, Early sapiens told stories, tales of spirits, ancestors, and forces beyond the visible world. These stories weren't just entertainment, they unified the group. They gave meaning to suffering, created shared rules, and bound people together with invisible threads of belief. Neanderthals buried their dead and showed glimpses of symbolic thought, but sapiens elevated it into a social glue that could hold thousands together. Art, too, exploded during this time. In caves across Europe, sapiens painted vast murals of animals, hunts, and abstract shapes. These weren't random doodles, they were records, lessons, and perhaps even rituals. A child growing up in such a culture inherited not just survival skills but also a shared vision of the world. With every drawing and every story, sapiens strengthened their identity, making their bonds more resilient than those of smaller, isolated groups. Culture also gave sapiens adaptability. They could create systems of trade, rituals that built trust, and taboos that protected resources. Belief allowed people who had never met to cooperate as if they were kin. Where Neanderthals might have seen us versus them, sapiens could create us on a much larger scale. This wasn't just survival, it was dominance through imagination. The ability to believe in things unseen, to create shared myths and rules, turned sapiens from scattered tribes into a force capable of shaping entire continents. And with this new power, the story of humanity was no longer about surviving nature. It was about mastering it. From fragile bands of hunter-gatherers clinging to survival, to the species that would one day shape the entire planet, our ancestors walked a razor's edge. They battled predators, famine, rival humans, and even the planet's fury, yet they endured. What kept them alive wasn't just strength or sharp tools, but imagination, cooperation, and resilience. The story of early humanity isn't just ancient history, it's a mirror. It shows us how fragile survival can be, but also how boundless our potential is when we adapt and unite. Every comfort we enjoy today rests on the shoulders of those who refused to give in when the odds seemed impossible. But here's the haunting truth. The same challenges that tested them, shifting climates, scarce resources, and fragile unity, echo in our world today. The difference is, their survival shaped the beginning of our story. Ours may determine the end. So ask yourself, if you were thrown back into that first week of human evolution, would you endure like they did, or vanish into history's silence?